It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
These are the final seconds.
The lead in the fourth. Can they hold on to it?
That do or die time. And everything rides on one shot. But it isn't going to be that easy.
And it's a one-point game.
This is down to the wire.
They're going to try the three-point attempt.
One shot to take you to the top. One winner. This is clutch basketball. That's the NBA playoffs. That's game.
Welcome into a Tuesday morning edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. A brutal loss last night to the Miami Heat, 98-88. It felt like a taste of playoff basketball for the New York Knicks, Alex, and at least last night, the Knicks weren't ready for it.
Yeah, I certainly hope that's not a taste of what the playoffs are going to be like, because we're in for a miserable 4 games if that's the case. But at any rate, yeah, the Knicks, it was a tough first half for both teams, but unfortunately Miami cracked the code in the second half, and the Knicks certainly did not. A little bit of timely shot making from Julius Randle and others down the stretch tried to get the Knicks back in, but it just wasn't enough. Miami put the foot on the gas and put them away, but we'll get into that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And I think we see Willis coming out. There he comes right now.
Starks without a five. Ewing for the win. Yes!
Puck left. Now fires it. And he's good. And he's fouled.
Anthony for three. Bang! That one goes down. This is all about back up off the glass. It's good.
Becomes infectious.
You are Locked On Knicks, and this episode is brought to you by Locker Room. Download the app and join me this week, Thursday at 5:30. That's right, we're recording Fan Friday on Thursday. That way we can release the podcast on Friday. We'll be talking about the Mavs game, a reunion with a certain snake. I'll just leave it at that. To get in on the action, Locker Room, changing the way we talk sports. This is Locked On Knicks. I am Gavin Shaw. Across the river, somewhere over there, he's Alex Wolf. I'm a play-by-play broadcaster in non-pandemic times, but during this ongoing apocalypse, I'm just a meager podcast host, and as always, joined by you, Alex, the editor-in-chief of the best Knicks website in the world, the Strickland. And anyone who's a fan of us or a fan of the Strickland, they had to watch a horrible game last night where the Knicks were absolutely anemic on offense, started off the night scoring just 16 points in the first quarter, turned it on in the second, did have a 16-0 burst, looked like they had control of this game for a little bit, but then Jimmy Butler got going in the second half, had something like 19 points in the second, finished with 27 points, 6 assists, 10 of 15 from the field, 7 of 8 from the foul line, absolutely ripping the Knicks' heart out. Bam Adebayo, without Mitchell Robinson to contest him, had far and away his best game against the Knicks in 3 attempts on the season, and ultimately New York just did not have the firepower to match up against the swarming Heat defense again and again. The Knicks' best options faltered under a whole lot of pressure. You go up and down the box score, and outside of maybe Derrick Rose, no one really had much of a night, Alex. But where do you want to start in this one?
I think it would be that Heat defense and just in general the intensity that the Knicks were facing. And to give the Knicks credit, like the one good part of this game was I thought that they responded well in the first half, where they started the game down big to Miami and then went on a 16-0 run in the second quarter that ultimately gave them the lead at the half. They were up, 43-36 at halftime, which is a really pathetic box score. But then the Heat in the second half just came out with a better game plan, I think, than the Knicks had. They managed to outdo their whole first half total just in the third quarter alone, with 39 points. And that was sort of what did the Knicks in right there. They just weren't able to come back from getting into that hole in the third quarter, because they got outscored by 18 points. But the Heat defense, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't impressed. That on defense and on offense, with the offensive rebounding, they were just, Bam Adebayo was huge. I saw a funny quote from him where he said he had 18 rebounds total and 8 offensive rebounds, and someone on the Heat beat brought it up to him that, oh, you had 8 offensive rebounds, how important was that to the game or whatever. And he was like, I had 8 offensive rebounds, good for me. And I'm like, yeah, good for you, Bam. It was pretty convincing performance for him on the glass, despite the fact that Nerlens Noel held his own pretty good defensively. It exposed his futility on the glass a number of times. And just in general, the swarming defense that you mentioned, it didn't really matter if they were going man or zone, which they threw a little bit of both at the Knicks, but they were doubling ball handlers like crazy. But then not only doing that, which, some teams have done that to the Knicks, but then been lax with the rest of their defense, but they were doubling and then were flying all over the place, getting their hands on passes, generating steals, and starting fast breaks. And it was too much for the Knicks in the second half. The Heat just decided, we don't want to be on a 7-game losing streak, particularly to the Knicks. And, they decided to treat this game like a must win, like a playoff game, which, honestly, it kind of was for them, given the way that things are going in the East right now. Every single game matters. And that was all it took. And the Knicks wound up losing. But I don't know if you had a different thing that you wanted to kind of harp on first, but that was kind of my first impression, was just the Heat defense was a level that the Knicks were not quite ready for on this day, at least.
No, I had a similar takeaway. I mean, it felt like we were watching the bubble Heat defensively and then even offensively for stretches with the way they were pinging the ball around. It feels like they're just warming into rhythm right now, and obviously they still have yet to add Victor Oladipo. I mean, depending on how Miami finishes the year, that's going to be a really, really painful playoff matchup for someone. Can you imagine poor Milwaukee if they get Miami in the first round after last year? It's not necessarily an implausible scenario, but at this point, I mean, especially with Oladipo coming in, I wouldn't be surprised if they went on a big win streak and ended up being the 4 seed. And maybe the Knicks will get them. Maybe the Knicks will get someone else. But it's been a trend all year when the Knicks have played Miami. It's consistently been one of their hardest games, and I would say the most intense games they've played all year. I know Macri made a reference to, like, in his newsletters, like, oh, the rivalry's back. And I was thinking, like, it's kind of been what I've been thinking every single game they've played Miami this season. Both sides going really, really hard. And the Knicks, I think the biggest thing for them tonight was that Julius Randle, despite getting the game off against the Bucks, didn't seem quite 100%. And then Tibbs made some poor lineup decisions. But those are conversations, Alex, for a future segment. I'm gonna very quickly tell the good people about one of our favorite sponsors, one of the ones that we use the most, and that is Locker Room. This episode is brought to you by Locker Room. Locker Room is the first social audio platform made for sports fans. The app is free to download, and once you're in, you can talk with me, other fans, athletes, and insiders. I would say we're insiders in real time about your favorite team or sport. I will be hosting rooms for the Locked On Knicks podcast once a week. We've already done it twice. Yes, you can finally join in on the conversation you listen to on here every single day. Locker Room is the perfect place to start or join conversations about the league. You'll find fans just like you on Locker Room for watch parties, debates, post-game breakdowns, and of course, reacting to big news or rumors. You will have a chance to chat with me, Alex, and you might even have a chance to be featured on the Locked On Knicks podcast. We've been pretty good about that before. Everyone who's talked has gotten on the final pod through our Locker Room conversations. So be sure to join us this week, Thursday at 5:30 p.m. I'll be hosting a room. and you can join in. Go download the free Locker Room app now, currently available on all iOS devices. Be sure to create a profile, link your Twitter, and join the NBA group for the latest league updates. You can follow me at Gavin-Shaw. Alex, I'm pretty sure you're at Alex-Wolf. Maybe just Alex.
Just Alex Wolf straight, no dash.
All right. No dash for me either, now that I think about it, to be notified when the room goes live. I know you won't want to miss it. I'm planning on going live this week again, Thursday at 5:30. I can't wait to hear everyone's thoughts on the Knicks. We'll see you there. Locker Room, changing the way we talk sports.
These are the final seconds.
The lead in the fourth. Can they hold on to it?
That do or die time. And everything rides on one shot. But it isn't going to be that easy.
And it's a one-point game.
This is down to the wire.
They're going to try the three-point attempt.
One shot to take you to the top. One winner. This is clutch basketball. That's the NBA playoffs. That's game.
All right, guys, we're going to get into more Knicks stuff, but if you want to get all the sports you need in under 20 minutes, we can do that with the Locked On Today podcast. Host Peter Brukowski updates you on the latest news in every major sport with the help of our local experts, which occasionally includes Alex and I. Somehow, inexplicable. Follow the Locked On Today podcast wherever you get pods. All right, Alex, I opened this up to a number of different avenues of conversation before the break. I thought there were certainly some lineup issues tonight. I thought this would have been a great game to get Emmanuel quickly more involved, given the way that the Heat were just suffocating the Knicks on offense. It felt like for long stretches, especially when Elfrid Payton was out there, but even when Derrick Rose was out there, the Knicks just didn't have enough spacing to really stretch out that zone and puncture a hole in it. I don't want to say concerned with Julius Randle's play because I don't really put it on him. I think I'm getting concerned with Julius Randle's workload, but I know in the past you've disagreed with me on that being an issue to some extent. Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I still don't know if I mean, I guess we'll have to see over time how things go with Randle. Like, I would need to see a few games like this in a row to truly be like he's overworked. He's, whatever. I think weirdly he seemed kind of rusty after just the one day off, but maybe he also has that thigh bruise, which might have been bothering him more than he was letting on, but he wanted to get out there against the Heat. But it certainly doesn't help. Like, if his athleticism was hampered at all, he needs every bit of it against Bam Adebayo, and that's who they had on him for most of the game. I think that Adebayo is just one of those, like, how you talked about how, like, Ben Simmons is RJ's nightmare matchup. Like, I think Bam Adebayo is kind of Randle's nightmare matchup, where he's just as strong, just as fast, but, bouncier, can block his shot, is smart enough to not, fall for his best tricks and stuff like that. I think that we've seen that each time that the Knicks have played the Heat, that Bam Adebayo definitely is a good positional fit with Julius Randle as far as defense is concerned. So, and even with that said, like, Randle still put up a pretty respectable stat line. It wasn't his best, but like 22 points, 7 of 17, 3 of 9 from 3, 5 of 8 from the free throw line was a concerning trend for the whole team. Once again, everybody shot 60% from the free throw line, but also 8 rebounds, 3 assists. I thought it was an okay game for Randle. I thought he just looked a little, I don't know if tired is the word. I think that he looked a little overmatched at times, and maybe he was still hurting a tiny bit, but it didn't bother me a ton, his game. What did bother me was, like what you said, the lineup decisions. I think that, playing Elfrid Payton for 19 minutes at this point and still starting him, I don't understand the rationale. I don't know, because you're tanking the value of some of your best players by playing him those amount of minutes and mostly with the starters. Like, I don't know what Tibbs has seen or not seen to make him think that playing Elfrid Payton out there as the starting point guard is at all better than playing either Emmanuel Quickley or Derrick Rose out there. as the starting point guard, like I'd really be truly fine with either of them as long as it's not Elfrid Payton at this point. But, I think we saw perfectly in this game, like the Knicks came out flat to start the first and they came out flat to start the third. Like, what's the common denominator there? I don't think it's that hard to realize that it's Elfrid Payton. I think that he doesn't provide any spacing against a team like the Heat where they were employing that swarming defense this whole time. He was the one guy that they knew that they could ignore. And early in the game, he wound up taking 2 3-point attempts and both clanged just like you would think they would. And the Heat knew, like, don't even defend that. Defend all these other guys. Pay attention to everybody else. Don't worry about Elfrid Payton on the perimeter. And literally all you have to worry about is if he gets inside. But if he gets inside, you have Bam Adebayo there who can just gobble him up like he can the best players in the league. And so, essentially Elfrid was like rendered useless. I know nominally on the box score, if someone was just looking at the box score, they would say, oh, but he shot 2 of 4, only had 5 points, but at least he didn't shoot that bad, whatever. But it wasn't really about how he shot overall. It was mostly about the opportunities or lack thereof that him being out there created for the team. So again, I always do kind of feel bad. I don't think Elfrid's a bad dude or whatever. So I feel kind of bad crapping on him, but this is sort of just our daily crap on Elfrid session, because when he was out there, I just don't think the team was as good, and we're seeing sort of the real drawbacks of, like, his minutes have been going down, and I give Tibbs credit for that. Him playing 19 minutes versus earlier in the season when he was playing 30 plus almost every game, and quickly was getting buried on the bench and whatever. That's an improvement to a degree, I guess, but we're seeing like the detriment of like
lack of spacing,
placeholder starts, I guess. I was gonna say just like a lack of spacing, obviously, but like just the idea of putting him out there to start, like even if he's not going to play the whole game. It almost reminds me of like what the Knicks did with Taj Gibson last year starting, except for that actually made sense because Mitch seemed a lot more comfortable off the bench and whatever. And, Tibbs, I think, is sort of implied that, like, oh, what are we going to do without quickly scoring off the bench? But now you have Derrick Rose there. So, or you could just move Rose to the starting lineup. I mean, I really don't think the decisions are that hard, and you could just sit Elfrid Payton. But, yeah, I think that was if I had to point to one thing that I think led to the Knicks sort of tanking the first and third quarters, I think it was in large part the fact that the Heat are smart enough to know that they don't have to respect Elfrid at all, and that was basically what damned the Knicks in the start of those quarters.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think another thing that really hurt them were the struggles of one RJ Barrett, who had arguably, I mean, his worst game, I would say, post All-Star break for sure, maybe even further back than that. 32 minutes. 4 for 12 from the field, didn't hit a three, didn't hit a free throw, so just 8 points, 4 assists, 4 boards. Did have some good moments in this one. We could start off with the positives, like had that pretty nasty reverse spin on Tyler Hero. That was satisfying for everyone well locked in on this point on the RJ over Hero camp. Though Hero got the better of him in this game. That was a great play where he finished with a dunk. But just felt like a dispiriting night for RJ. Like I think the play that summed it up best was I can't remember if he was guarding Duncan Robinson or if he got switched onto him, but just played like brilliant defense, was up in his face and basically saying like, look, I know you're not going to do anything other than shoot a three on me. So I'm just going to pressure the hell out of you. Did that perfectly. Shot clock's winding down. Robinson pivots, hits like a fadeaway 25-foot three ball in RJ's eye. And I remember just thinking that moment, all right, the Knicks probably aren't going to win this game if Duncan Robinson, bless his soul, is hitting that kind of shot. And offensively, RJ, outside of that little spin and slam, did have like a nice duck in on a give and go with Julius Randle to open the third quarter. That gave me a little bit of optimism, but then didn't score again from that point forward. He struggled against the Heat all year. And I think it's because Miami is, I would say, along with Toronto and maybe the Lakers when they're at full strength, as good as any team in the league at highlighting weaknesses and even being able to do that in the regular season when that's normally something teams really fix in on in the playoffs, but just really, really pinpointing opponents' weaknesses and saying, all right, we're going to take away everything they do well, or at least like the top two things they do well. And they're going to have to really rely on tertiary aspects of their team. And if you're looking for, again, like an area where the Knicks can struggle to some extent in the playoffs, that's it. It's how are their role players that, for the most part, I mean, the Knicks, remember, coming in tonight had won 3 straight games, have generally been playing exceptionally well post All-Star break. Like all the games they lost were against the Sixers and the Nets outside of that one Bucks blowout, games that easily could have been victories. But how is that going to translate to the postseason? My biggest concern was, all right, but what are they really getting from the role guys in the postseason? Is like Obi, you would assume they're going to have to just take out of the rotation. Taj, who's been really good, is he ready for that like jump in athleticism and intensity? At his age, Derrick Rose, you're going to get some good nights, but are the bad nights going to absolutely tank you? Can Alec Burks, like, and he was okay in this game, but after 7 straight games of 20 points, he finished with 6 points in 27 minutes. Is he going to be able to get to his spots? Is he going to be able to get shots off quickly? Is he going to falter under increased pressure? And again, he was really inefficient tonight. I think this one really highlighted, if you're not getting that max production from Julius Randle, and that allows everyone else to play off him, where he's getting 2 or 3 defenders looking at him every single possession, is this thing going to work? And tonight, again, with some like notable notes, like Reggie Bullock just coming off of injury, Nerlens Noel having to transition into being a starter, which he actually did exceptionally well. These are the things to watch, I think, as the Knicks get closer and closer to postseason basketball. I do think you hit the nail on the head, Alex, to some extent, that if you're going to play Alfred, that task just gets that much harder, and you're basically doing these guys who are already at a disadvantage against more talented teams a disservice by just making their life harder. So hopefully that dawns on Tibbs at some point. But I think R.J. Barrett was somewhat emblematic of the issues the Knicks are going to face in the postseason and beyond. But before we get into the specifics with the other guys, I'm gonna give people a spot where they can bet on the Knicks postseason aptitude or that lack thereof, and that is BetOnline. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Football might be over, but the NBA, college basketball, and NHL are in full swing. BetOnline even covers awards, TV shows, and reality TV. Real-time updated odds and props on almost anything you can imagine. BetOnline has you covered for all the news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's absolutely free to sign up. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today, and you can receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit if, a very big if, use our promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Maybe they can even bet on Built Bar Madness, Alex.
Yeah, it is time for the daily Built Bar Madness update. We have been telling you about Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar in the market for a while now. Built Bar is the amazing low-calorie, low-sugar, high-protein, high-fiber, fantastic tasting protein bar with 100% chocolate on all their bars. And now it's time to figure out which Built Bar is best. It is Built Bar Madness, and we have made it, guys. I don't know if I've succeeded in getting you all hyped up for this, but hopefully, you have some invested interest in this. We are at the Flavorful 4 at this point. It is the hardest to say round in a podcast live read. It has made me stumble at least 3 or 4 times. But the first matchup today is Cookies and Cream versus Cookie Dough Chunk. It's the battle of the cookies. And, it's a tough matchup, but I think I am going Cookies and Cream all the way in this one. I think it is one of the best flavors of Built Bar overall. It beat one of my other favorites, Coconut Almond. So, just for me, they got to win this one, because if they lost, it was all for nothing. What if Coconut Almond could have beaten Cookie Dough Chunk? It's just one of those what if scenarios. So I'm pulling for Cookies and Cream. If you want to vote, go to BuiltBar.com or go to bar_Built on Twitter. And if you want to pick up a Flavorful 4 variety box, you can do that. You can build your own box on BuiltBar.com of protein bars to send right to your door. you're not locked in on buying like 18 of one flavor. You can sample every Built Bar flavor if you want. Build a huge variety pack. If that's, what floats your boat, go for it. And I would totally support you. And if you do, remember to use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order at BuiltBar.com, and check back to see who won today's matchup and who will become the best tasting protein bar. All right, and that's it for this ad break. Get more analysis on the top prospects available in this year's NBA draft with the Locked On NBA Draft podcast. Scouting reports, draft rumors, mock drafts, and full coverage of March Madness 4 days a week from credentialed draft experts. Subscribe today and follow Locked On NBA Draft. All right, Gavin. So I wanted to kind of respond to like what you were saying at the end there. I don't necessarily know that I'm actually, I guess, all right, I guess this is the conflicting thing to me, right? So like Colin Loring, who's been on here before, writes for the Strickland, wrote a recap last night where he sort of said like, it's time to start holding the Knicks to a different standard. Like it's reasonable to be disappointed with them now if they come out and lose a game like this, because they're the 4 seed in the East right now. Even if it's a flimsy foothold, that is a position that they're holding at the moment. I think no matter what, they're going to be a playoff team this year. I don't know what seed it's going to be, if it's going to be the 4 seed, or I really don't see them going further down than the 8 seed and having at least an advantage in a play-in scenario, but I guess we'll see. But I think it's pretty reasonable to say they're not going to fall any lower than 10th. So regardless of what your expectations are for them, in some ways it seems like it's time to start leveling up our expectations for them and not just being like, oh, look at this plucky team that we have, and being like, no, you guys are somewhat good now. Like you shouldn't be coming out and crapping the bed against, the Heat. And you should have a better game plan, and Tibbs, you should have better substitution patterns, and you guys should come out looking better, because really this is about 3 straight games now that they've come out really looking sluggish, starting with that second Wizards game, and then obviously the Bucks game where they just eked out the win. Granted, the Knicks themselves were kind of shorthanded in that one, but they just barely snuck out a victory against the really shorthanded Bucks. And then to come out this way in this game, it's slightly concerning. And, there's a part of me that wants to be like, I'm holding you guys to a higher standard now. Like, you're supposed to be better than this. We've seen that you could be better than this throughout this year. But then the other part of me too, is reminded, like you just kind of said, Gavin, like a lot of the players that have been really carrying the Knicks this year. I mean, Randall has taken his step forward. I do think he's a legitimate star. And I mean, we even noted, even on a quote unquote bad night for him last night, he still had 22 points on 7 of 17 shooting, 3 of 9 from 3, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. I mean, he still puts it together on any given night, even if he looks a little uncomfortable, even if he doesn't look his best self, whatever. But then when you think about the other guys that have contributed so much to this success, like you're looking at RJ Barrett, who's 20 years old. I mean, he's younger than a lot of the rookies this year, is consistently on a lot of nights coming out there and winning games for the Knicks, or, coming very close to winning them lately. So, I think that he's bound to have some off nights now and again, particularly against Jimmy Butler last night, who's sort of proved to be this like fun, like other team mentor for him. I don't know. I guess it's probably because Tibbs probably set them up, before one game, was just like, hey, Jimmy, can you give RJ some pointers or whatever? And now Jimmy is, I guess, taken that to the point where it seems like he's totally fine with, helping RJ out on the court throughout games and stuff. There was a moment in this one where it almost seemed like Jimmy got teed up for yelling at RJ. But I think it was actually that he was yelling at Scott Foster, who happened to be over RJ's shoulder. Scott Foster, of course, being the ref. But it was, that made for kind of a funny moment. Clyde and Breen had a little like on-air argument about who Jimmy was yelling at, where, it looked at first when you watched the first camera angle like, oh man, yeah, he was ripping into RJ, but it didn't seem like if he was yelling at RJ, it didn't seem like it was particularly incendiary. It just kind of seemed like him being like you got to do better than that if you're going to stop me, whatever. And it seemed pretty lighthearted, I guess.
Yeah.
But then when you saw a different camera angle, he was clearly yelling at Scott Foster, who was over RJ's shoulder, but then it was just this like funny exchange where like Clyde just didn't want to admit it was wrong. I guess it was because it was his birthday. Happy belated birthday to Clyde. He wanted to be right on this one. But he was like, oh well, it looks like he starts off yelling at Foster, but then finishes yelling at RJ, and then Breen was just like, no, Clyde, I think he was just yelling at Foster the whole time. That's why he got the technical foul. But at any rate, RJ, to get back to my point that I was making before this, RJ's been such a key component to what the Knicks are doing, but he is only 20 years old still. Emmanuel Quickley is a 21-year-old rookie, and he's been such a key component to so many wins and, just so many of the games where the Knicks are playing as well as they are. You have a number of vets like Reggie Bullock, Alec Burks, like those guys you do expect to be able to, ultimately give you more than maybe they gave you in a game like last night. But again, it's worth remembering that both those guys, I mean, they make a combined $9 million between the two of them. And there's a reason that that's the case. Like if Alec Burks was actually a consistent, efficient 20 to 22 point per game scorer, he'd be making a lot more than $6 million on a 1-year contract. The reality is that he's kind of a streak player. He both, talent wise and mentally, he seems kind of streaky in the sense that he'll have 5 games in a row where you think he's an all-star and then give you, another 3 games where you're like, dude, how did you not recognize these million different situations throughout the game that ultimately didn't work out for you? And then right now you're also without your starting center in Mitchell Robinson, and you're starting a point guard that doesn't fit with the rest of your starters to start most games. So there's a part of me, I don't know, I guess, Gavin, that there's this balancing act inside of me. Like my internal dialogue is like, is this team still a plucky underdog, or is this team something more now that now we have to hold them to a higher standard? I think we're in this weird spot where the answer kind of falls in the middle somewhere, where I guess you could say like, I expect more out of you, but I also understand if you're not quite ready to deliver that on a nightly basis yet, which is like a non-answer, but it just kind of is the reality of the situation to me, at least.
No, I think you're in the right, because they're at a point, talent-wise, coaching-wise, like full product-wise, where they're good enough to beat all the bad teams in the league. They should beat most of the like middling teams, like the teams nominally in the same tier as them, like the Chicagos, Atlantas, the Wizards when they're playing well. They should win those games, and when they don't, you have a right to be upset about it. Against teams like Miami, I just think this was a better team. This was we saw the group that made the NBA Finals a year ago, and the Knicks, like, they weren't quite ready for that kind of pressure defensively or that kind of ball movement offensively. And I don't think they necessarily played horribly. Again, I'm with you on, we keep saying it over and over again, some of the lineup decisions, but I really, outside of Randall not being at quite 100%, I don't think they had a horrible game. And you put in, like, I mean, obviously, to your point, Bam had something to do with it, but you put in like a relatively normal night for Randall. I mean, the Knicks still only lost this game by 10. Maybe it's a 5-point game, and that's about where the Knicks should be against the Miami Heat right now. So I don't really have any negative long-term takeaways. I think it's just a good reminder of, if you thought the Knicks were even better than their record suggested, maybe tonight gave you a little bit of perspective on that. And as I talked about last episode, I thought a lot of their lingering upside kind of rested inside of Mitchell Robinson and like on his shoulders, and like his ability to turn it up a level and play at his absolute best. I thought that was sort of like the means for the Knicks to make a big in-season jump, because it felt like early in the season he was kind of on that growth trajectory. And if the Knicks just got like a little bit better with their spacing, a little bit better at getting him the ball, I thought all of a sudden you could have a situation where the Knicks had 5 really, really strong starters. And it's not a shot at Noel, who is arguably the Knicks' best player tonight. It's just kind of a fact about their overall rotation and the upside that Robinson brings on a night-to-night basis. So I think you were missing that. Alex, we're running a little low on time, so I was going to roll through an MSG 90, if that's good with you, or if you want to do it, I'll throw it over to you. I feel like I'm hogging it.
No, it's fine. I like listening to your hyperspeed stuff here. It's like we're in the Millennium Falcon, and then you hit the hyperdrive and get us going for those last few minutes there. So yeah, I'm down to hear what you got. Unload the clip, get out all the stuff you need to get out, because much like the last game, I'm pretty much ready to move on from this one.
All right. Throw 90 seconds on the clock, and feel free to count me in.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, we're starting with some general stuff because I feel like I never talk about the game itself enough. We mentioned it, that 16-0 run in the first half, just one turnover in the second quarter for the Knicks. I thought the Knicks were plagued by bad passing in this one. There were a number of plays, like there's one where RJ was inbounding it and literally threw it from out of bounds to out of bounds, trying to get it to Julius Randle. That was really bad. It was an ongoing issue. Players were arguing literally every call in this game. I feel like that more than anything else is what made it feel like a playoff game. Jimmy Butler, absolutely amazing in the third quarter of this one. The Knicks, Reggie Bullock, who looked a step slow off his normal gait, just could not keep Butler away from the rim. Key sequence in the second half, Julius Randle misses a layup, Heat run down, get a Duncan Robinson three, 69-61. IQ comes back, gets a three-pointer of his own, but then back-to-back threes from Andre Iguodala, Gabe Vincent. 11-point lead for Miami, one that they never relinquished. Hero started the fourth quarter with a fourth straight three, and the Knicks played really, really great defense on that first possession of the fourth, but gave up something like 4 straight offensive rebounds, which again is where you really miss Mitchell Robinson. The Knicks rebounding rate dramatically worse when he is off the court than when he is on it. The starters outside of Julius Randle going 0 for 10 from 3 in this one. Again, if you're looking for some outlier stuff to potentially be encouraged by, that is a stat that encourages me slightly. I don't think the Knicks shoot quite that bad in the future. Nerlens Noel, man, what a game defensively. I want to go over everything, but he had this great fake little dribble handoff where he turned, pivoted, went to the basket. I think the Heat were shocked because he almost never does that. Ran down the lane, got a slam. Also had a couple really nice jump hooks, a few nice short jumpers, and had the block of the season, or one of his blocks of the season, Andre Iguodala, trying to rise up in his 17th season, slam in his face. Noel was having none of it, sending him right back to earth. Derrick Rose, one of the few Knicks who at least statistically had a good game. He had this great drive around a Taj Gibson screen when the Knicks desperately needed a bucket to cut it to 64-60. Felt like the Knicks were on a comeback trail. Couldn't quite get all the way there, but had another really nice sequence, little Randall to Burks to Rose in the corner to like an insanely high arcing three in Tyler Hero's face to get it to 86-78 after 5 straight points from Julius. Another situation where it felt like the Knicks were back in it. Couldn't get all the way there. Emmanuel quickly, mixed night for him, came right off the bench, immediately torched his college backcourt mate, Tyler Hero, for a layup. A couple possessions later, pump faked his way by Hero, tried to drive and dunk on, I think it was Precious Achiuwa, but he got fouled. I just like quickly going that hard to the rim, not trying to finish with a floater, trying to finish with physicality. Maybe a sign that his strength and athleticism are improving throughout his rookie season. Came off the bench late in the third. Again, it just wasn't a heavy minutes night for him, but had almost immediately got a steal. Then comes down and answers Duncan Robinson's three with a quick one of his own that was 5 feet behind the arc. That got it to 69-64. Felt like a big play in the moment. Had another crazy three to open the fourth quarter where he was kind of dribbling away from Robinson. Felt like he was slightly off balance, didn't fully have his feet set. Still able to hit it. I know he also missed a lot of shots. I'm choosing to ignore those. Play Emmanuel quickly more, Tom Thibodeau. Obi Toppin had what Mike Breen called his shot of the season. I feel like it feels like the only way he ever gets to the rim now is by running those fake dribble handoffs, and they work because 9 times out of 10 he does actually hand the ball off and doesn't really want anything to do with it. But this time caught Andre Iguodala. He got Andre Iguodala last time they played the Heat too, and then had this really nice step-in layup, kind of beat Bam to the basket. Shows you what he can do when he can get up quickly. The issue is always with Obi is he just has very few ways to manufacture rim looks. And that continues to be a big problem for him. Also, quick shout out to Clyde and an interaction with Obi where Obi was sprinting down the floor to get a loose ball. It was big puppy energy from Obi where it was well-intentioned, hardworking, but ultimately stupid because the ball was definitely going out of balance. And by running down the floor, he gave Goran Dragic a chance to just throw it off his leg, inspiring a great line from Clyde that said, "Obi, Toppin, he should have been stopping." And I'll cut it off there. I'll stop in myself, Alex.
That was well over 90 seconds,
Oh, boy.
Gavin.
My God.
That was
I'm sucking.
that was perhaps your worst effort yet. That was about 4.5 minutes.
What? Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I passed out. Oh.
But at any rate, my last couple moments that I'll shout out. I'll also shout out that Nerlens Noel crazy dunk that he pulled off. I mean, I didn't think he had that in his bag, man. And it's been like the second or third time that he's pulled one of those out recently, where he just he just catches his defender sleeping, puts it on the ground and dribbles it a couple times and throws down a big slam. Clyde, I thought it was hilarious. So it was his birthday, obviously. First off, Mike Breen gave him a nice little touching tribute when they, announced that it was his birthday over the PA system and everything. And they played Happy Birthday for him on the organ. It seemed like some people in the crowd were singing it to him. They showed Clyde in the broadcast booth. Very sweet moment. But for the MSG trivia,